This screencast will conclude chapter 22 and will focus particularly on the rainbow and on fiber optics. The rainbow, of course, is this amazing and extraordinarily beautiful phenomenon in the sky that you see when you are somewhere between the sun and a rain shower. The sun needs to be at your back. And as that light from the sun travels towards all of the millions and millions and millions of individual raindrops, we're looking now over here, the Roy G. Biv, all the colors of the rainbow, the white light, strikes the water droplet, and because blue is bent the biggest, remember that, B, 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 blue is bent the biggest, or we could say violet light, which is even beyond the blue, is refracted the most. You can see that because it's refracted the most, the violet light strikes the back of the rainbow, the water droplet there. The red light only strikes the back of the raindrop there. And of course, the other colors are in between. Then they are reflected off the back of the raindrop. The refraction takes place there. The refraction takes place there. And so coming out the other end, you'll notice that violet is higher up and red is farther down, and the rest of the colors are in between. That angle is 40 degrees for the violet and 42 for the red. Now, as we come down here, if you're the observer and you have the sun at your back and you're looking up into the water vapor that is up in the sky, as the white light comes in from behind you at a 42-degree angle, the red is going to come out, and at a 40-degree angle, the violet is going to come out. The violet is going to miss you altogether at the top of the rainbow and land on the ground, hit the ground somewhere behind you, whereas you're going to see the red. Meanwhile, if we talk about the light that is striking the bottom of the rainbow, again, the red is going to come at a 42-degree angle and the violet at a 40-degree angle, but this time you're going to see the violet and the red is going to strike the ground in front of you. Therefore, the violet is going to be at the bottom of the rainbow and the red at the top of the rainbow, as you can see in this picture. Now, if you get a double rainbow and you're getting double refraction, you can see that that gets reversed. And again, this rainbow is just a marvelous and beautiful display of God's creativity. And of course, in Scripture, we know in the early chapters of Genesis that God uses the rainbow as a sign and symbol to Noah and the other survivors of the ark that he is going to maintain and keep his covenant promises, even when we as human beings do not. So during the time of the Genesis flood, during the time of Noah, God cleans up the incredible corruption of human beings and the effect of that corruption on all the animals that the human beings have encountered. And after much patience and much warning, the extraordinarily corrupt human beings and sadly the animals that have been affected by that are cleaned up in the flood, and Noah and the animals on the ark begin to repopulate the earth. And this rainbow was a reminder that this will never happen again in this way. Of course, at the end of time, when Jesus comes back, there is that refining fire that is going to be the cleaning up as heaven is established on earth. Heaven and earth become one, if you remember the Christmas hymn, Joy to the World. And as a result, we have the renewed heavens and the renewed earth without any vestiges of human corruption anymore. And of course, it is a real shame and a real tragedy that some organizations like to co-opt this symbol of God's justice, but also of God's grace, and use it for their organization. Now, we've talked about Huygens' principle in an earlier talk where we were comparing Newton's corpuscular or particle model with Huygens' wave model for explaining the various properties of light. And he likes to use all the points along the surface of a wave to predict where that light will be propagated if going in a straight line, or reflected or refracted if striking a surface. And an analogy that supports Huygens' idea of refraction and the slowing down of light as it enters a denser medium, which was the opposite prediction that Newton made, if you remember the discussion, is this barrel rolling across concrete towards grass. Now imagine that we draw a normal line. There's my normal line. And imagine that this barrel strikes the grass. Notice that this part of the barrel hits the grass before this part of the barrel. So the leading edge is going to be slowed down before the trailing edge. Here's my incoming or incipient angle. And here is my refracted angle. And you can see that my angle of incidence is greater than the angle of refraction. A lot of bent lines there. And it shows that as light enters a denser medium, it is going to be bent towards the normal. And indeed, Huygens' prediction here was proven to be true. Now, another very interesting phenomenon having to do with refraction and reflection is called total internal reflection. And the idea here is that when light encounters a boundary between a medium with a higher index of refraction and one with a lower index of refraction, that light gets reflected inside the surface. You can kind of see it right here. This light strikes there, and then it gets reflected inside the surface instead of exiting the surface. And you can kind of observe this if you see a big plane of glass and you're looking at it straight on. Let's say this is a plane of glass, and you're looking at it directly from this position right here, that as you move sideways and increasingly look at the pane of glass from an angle, at some point when you look at the pane of glass, you're going to see something out here. Let's put another person. You're going to see something there and not something on the other side of the glass. That is called the critical angle. The critical angle, then, that means that the refracted light ray moves parallel to the boundary. At some point, it's going to move along here before it's actually reflected off. That's the critical angle. For angles of incidence greater than that critical angle, the beam is entirely reflected. So if we come up here and look at this diagram, here, if we're looking straight this way from a denser medium to a less denser medium, we're going to just be able to see things straight ahead of us. If we're looking at a little bit of an angle, there's a bending away from the normal as we exit into a less denser medium, still bent away from the normal, and we're going to see things on the other side. But then at a certain angle, we don't see anything out here. Instead, it is internally reflected. All of it's internally reflected. Instead of some internally reflected, some internally reflected, now all of it is internally reflected from here on. And that is the critical angle. At that angle, all the light is internally reflected. And we can use Snell's law to calculate that angle. And it turns out that the critical angle can be determined because the sine of that angle is going to be the ratio of two indices of refraction. N2 divided by N1. That's when we get total internal reflection. And of course, the value here, the index of refraction for material 1 is greater than the index of refraction for material 2. Just like up here, N1 is greater than N2. This would be like going from glass to air or water to air. Normally, though, we use glass because that enables us to have what we call fiber optic cables. It also happens to be why if you shape your diamond well, that's called proper faceting, so that all the flat surfaces of the diamond are such that all the light is internally reflected, and that's how you get the glitter or the beauty or the sparkle of the diamond. So, if we come down here to this fiber optic cable, it talks about a acceptance cone. So the acceptance cone, I'm having troubles making straight lines here. The acceptance cone is this cone right there. And if we follow this ray right here, it's going to be refracted towards the normal as it enters the denser medium. But that refraction is within the critical angle. Here's the critical angle. And so it's all reflected and none escapes. We can do the same thing from this direction. Comes down there, it's all internal reflected. So any light coming within this cone of acceptance will be totally internally reflected. If a beam of light is coming outside the cone of acceptance, it of course will be refracted towards the normal, but it exceeds the critical angle, and so it's going to end up going up and striking the jacket. And I just wanted to make sure I didn't skip anything. Here's that idea of a fish, and I'll let you look at that. What does the fish see? If the fish were to exceed that critical angle, he would just see something that's at the bottom of the pool of water. If there's a stone down here, And that light from that stone is internally reflected. The fish will see the stone, the reflection of the stone off the surface of the water. Because remember, the index of refraction is greater here than it is here in the air above. It also means that at certain angles, the fish is not going to be able to see perhaps a predator or a person who's fishing. And that wraps up our discussion of chapter 22.